One of the best things of living in Holyhead is the people. They are so friendly.
It's handy for the ferry.
It goes to Dublin. It's lovely. Takes you across the island, all the way out.
The tourists, they're always funny to watch.
If Holyhead was an animal.
Be a tortoise. It's been around for a while, and you never know how long it'll last, but it looks ancient.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thanks very, very much indeed. Welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which this week comes from the Ukeldry Centre in Holyhead. Speaking as an outsider, when you arrive here in Holyhead, right at the very far end of Wales, you get here to these sort of glorious cliffs and tranquil coves, and you can't help feeling, bloody hell, you're miles from anywhere, aren't you? This is not somewhere you come to live if you want to be just in a bit of Wales. You come here if you never want to see England again. This is... The first people to come here must have come up from another bit of Wales going, come on, we've got to go further into Wales, come on. Keep going, never mind Llandudno, no, that's practically Liverpool. Come on, up we come. And then eventually some people, oh, we've come so far that we're in a whole new island, Anglesey. Not far enough, come on, keep going. Now, what's this place? Llanfail, Pwllgwyn, Wec, Bilgeri, Llanjobwe, Llantysilio, go, go, go. Well, that's a little bit Welsh, but not enough, keep going. We can get further right, there's another island here, off the island, that's off Wales. Holy Island. Not far enough, come on. And then right at the very, very end, here's Holyhead. What must be annoying is it still didn't work, because you've come all this way and the English still pop up here every couple of days and buy another street. And, which is probably why you've come here tonight. You're worried if you turn your back, I'll buy the centre as a weekend cottage. I do also really love the town motto, and people use it a lot, which is, all the nearest ones in Llandudno. 80-mile round trip. Yeah. I've heard people say it about a bookshop, a bowling alley, about the nearest place to get wood cut. And now, of course, Prince William and Kate have moved up here at some point. I love the idea that they must have been told, nearest one's in Llandudno. You won't get a dubstep club nearer than that, Your Highness. Clue to how far away you are here is when you get here, if you go to certain bits of the town, your mobile beeps because it thinks you're in Ireland. And then you ring someone while you're on the Irish network and it's cost you about 50 quid. So this is a brilliant quirk of history that this is the only bit of Britain that's been invaded by the Irish. Wouldn't that surprise the Irish if you set up the Holyhead Republican Army, went around wearing balaclavas and chucking rocks at the mobile phone companies, shouting, take that, you orange bastards! It would only be fair to say you do obviously get lots of tourists come up here, that is true. To be fair, most of them carry at least one stick and a pair of binoculars. In fact, this tourist pamphlet I've got here says, when visiting Holyhead, take your binoculars to observe passing shipping. You're not quite trying to challenge Ibiza, are you? There can't be many teenagers that come up here. Oh, like, we had this, like, weekend in Holyhead and it was, like, awesome, because we, like, saw a ship through binoculars and everything. It was, like, banging. I wonder how many people have gone back from holiday and said the sentence, oh, we definitely recommend a weekend in Holyhead. We stood on a hill and saw a tug on the way to Liverpool. Now, one of the attractions here, honestly, Beagness, is it is an extraordinarily friendly place. Everyone seems to want to talk to you, even if sometimes you're not quite sure what they mean. We got to the hotel, I had a hat on. The bloke at the hotel, he said, oh, a hat. And then, honestly, this is exact words, he said, you're from London, aren't you? Then he said, they have a lot of hats in London. Also, Holyhead is a town of about 11,000, I believe that's right, but I wonder that there is still that many here because one of the most popular pastimes in the town is seeing how fast you can drive around the bit of road known as the Cliff Bends. For example, there's an internet forum about the bends on a local website. This is what one person wrote. It was fantastic. I went sideways round the bend by the cliff in my old Cavalier in the wet. I thought I was going to die. And then Baz replied with, I have a beach named after me on the Cliff Bends. My car landed on it. You do obviously have a grand history, Holyhead, being an important port. Many prominent people have been through here. In the early days, passengers might have to wait for the right sailing conditions and enjoy the delights of the town. For example, Jonathan Swift, who wrote Gulliver's Travels, was stuck here for a week and wrote a delightful poem about the town. Oh, Neptune, Neptune, must I still be here detained against my will? For here I sit in Holyhead with muddy ale and mouldy bread. Convict of lies is every sign, the inn has not a drop of wine. All Christian vitals stink of fish, I'm where my enemies would wish. Sweet, isn't it? Now, the reason that he was here, and the reason that there is a place here, is mostly because in 1572, Queen Elizabeth I decided she needed a regular postal service from London to Ireland, and the safest and most convenient route was from here to Dublin. So post boys came on horseback with packets from London. It took 41 hours in winter and then 3 days at sea to get to Ireland. Now, the thing is, when you know that your message has to go through all that, at least you are going to make an effort to write something worthwhile, aren't you? I don't suppose people got a quill pen and wrote a letter and sealed it and sent it off in a packet, and then 4 days later in Dublin, someone opened it up and said, what does it say? Let's see. OMG awesome. We must reply instantly. LOL. Now get the servants to deliver this packet to the Port Godspeed with fair winds. It shall reach London in 4 days. It must seem odd living here as well, because thousands of people come through, but very, very few of them stop. To the outsider, this is it's romantic, Holyhead, because it's sort of probably taken ages to get here, and then you're now heading across the Irish Sea to Ireland. It's exciting, and you're on a ferry, and you're going to be with a load of people who will almost certainly be drunk. I'm sure you all know the Pogues song, Boat Train, about a trip here that goes, first we drank some whiskey, then we drank some gin, then we drank tequila. I think that's what did me in. I woke up in the toilet when we got to Holyhead. The doors were all a-banging and I wished that I was dead. Now you should be proud of that. It made Shane McGowan think he'd gone too far. That's a town worth having. I do want to ask, do people here, do you ever go on the ferry? Has anyone been on the crossing when it's got really rough and started chucking about?
I'm the captain on it.
You're the captain on it?
No, it's lots of fun. You know, we always enjoy watching people getting sick. We've got very good CCTV systems. We have competitions on the bridge where we can look around, and sort of family groups. You'll see the kids going first, and then the mum and dad trying to look away. As soon as the kids go in the bag, mum goes, then dad's next. It's a very common thing. I mean, there are times when it's been so bad, it's like the Crimea, the sort of bodies around the cabin, people sitting around campfires, playing mouth organs, bandages around the head, horses being shot. It can get quite bad.
The captain on the ferry. One time, when I was coming from Dunleary to Holyhead, it was really rough, and I went out on the deck. There was waves going everywhere, and there was me and one other bloke out there sort of looking at each other, and it's sort of going up and down. And this bloke walked over, and he was German, and he honestly walked over to me and he said, the sea, it is a merciless beast. Thing is, I think travelling across the sea, it's a proper way to travel because you can see the obstacles, you can see what you're crossing, and, you know, it's not like on a plane. I remember sort of being on this plane once, and the captain announced, he said, because of, you know, the wind directions or something, he said, we will be arriving in Gatwick about 20 minutes later than scheduled. And this woman who was sat next to me went, oh. And I thought, oh, for God's sake, woman, you're travelling across a whole ocean. For most of humanity, it would not have been possible to imagine making this journey. Or if you did, it would have taken you 6 weeks and you'd have caught scurvy and probably tipped up and been eaten by sharks. And now you're just worried because, oh, bloody hell, now I'm going to miss cash in the attic. But the ferry, you couldn't possibly be on a ferry, even the most impatient person, if it's a force 8 gale, going up to the captain going, oh, for God's sake, do something about those waves. I'm supposed to be at a meeting in Dunleary at 9 o'clock. I spent an afternoon, actually, wandering around the port, and what amazed me there is how calm it is, given that this huge, great, enormous machine sort of comes in and out several times a day. And I went in the control room, and there's a couple of blokes there who have to monitor the ferries, and they're just calm, going, oh, right, here it is. Buzz through to the captain. Yeah, you've got about 300 yards to go. And you'll be on the land, see? And I'm thinking, if this was me, I'd be going, watch out, for Christ's sake, slow down. If you go too far, you'll go up the high street and land in the co-op. What are you doing? You've come far enough, the passengers won't mind, they've got most of the way, make them swim the last few yards. Don't, what are you doing? But nothing flaps them. I can imagine them going, bzzz. I'll always have the Coast Guard. Thought I'd better report there's a sea monster by the breakwater. He's got 3 heads and a trident. Should we get a brew on? The sea, historically, obviously, it can be a merciless beast. When I was shown around the museum by John, there's a lovely man who runs the museum there, and the first thing he showed me was some bits from a ship, the Primrose Hill. And he said, oh, it sank off the Holyhead coast in 1900 and the ship was lost. And then he showed me some cuttings about a ship called the Anglia that hit a main in the First World War, and the ship was lost. And then he showed me some pieces salvaged from the Thetis submarine in 1939 that sank during a trial, and the ship was lost. I said, do you ever tell a story that doesn't end up with and the ship was lost? I could imagine him reading his version of Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. Baby Bear said, who's been sleeping in my bed? And at that point, a freak wind blew the house into the sea and the ship was lost. To be fair, the museum does also have a mammoth that lived here back before Neolithic times. The mammoth has been called Myfanwy, I'm sure you'll know about it. And the bones are by this marvellous description at the museum that says, and I quote, Myfanwy roamed Holyhead about 10,000 years ago. Holyhead looked much different then. You learn something new every day, don't you? Who'd have thought that 10,000 years ago Holyhead was not only different, but much different? Maybe they could do pictures of then and now and have a spot the difference competition. Well, there's no post office. There's a mammoth, there's not so many of them now. And it looks like there was more to do back then. The most celebrated seafarer from the town was Commander John Skinner, as in the Skinner Memorial, which is a big obelisk that's on the hill that looks over the town. And the first interesting thing about Skinner, being the sort of representative of the town, if you like, from history, is that he wasn't from Holyhead, he was from New Jersey in America. Which, I mean, sort of suggests you're a bit short on celebrities here. If you want another monument, perhaps you'll go, oh, no one round here deserves it. Let's build one to Rihanna. Skinner fought for the British in the War of Independence, commanding a ship called the Phoenix, but the Phoenix was fired on and he lost an arm and the ship caught fire and sunk. It was decided he couldn't carry on in the Navy because, I mean, yeah, what can you do in the Navy if you've only got one arm? He seems to have become quite popular in the town, partly because he gave away money to various causes, but also he was considered a local character because he went hunting with one arm, and, frustratingly, according to my account of him, he was usually accompanied by his tame, mischievous raven. And that's all it says about it. How frustrating is why do books do that? There'll be 50 pages about the route to some battle or something, and then they'll slip something by, like, on his return to France, he became a ladyboy before rejoining the Pope. What? That's the interesting bit. Tell me about the raven. You make a brilliant case for tourism here. For example, in Ismond, Anglesey, this brochure says, best of all, we're an island, so the chances are that on any given day, conditions will be perfect for you somewhere. I'm not big on meteorology and all that. Does that work? Because it's an island, every day there's a selection of perfect holiday conditions. Today, it's perfect for sunbathing in Holyhead, but in Cemmaes Bay, it's ideal for skiing. There are other reasons for having your holiday here. This is from the same brochure, I quote, walking on Anglesey brings out the romantic in everyone. It certainly worked with teacher Dave from Altrincham. He plucked up the courage to go on a speed dating stroll as part of the Anglesey Walking Festival. Dating? On a walking festival? How does that work? Hello, I'm Dave. I like your boots. What sort of music do you like? Mind the puddle. I'm a teacher. Have you been to the lighthouse? It's shut for wind, I'm afraid. Don't go near the edge. Oh, you're a Satanist. I'll let you know. Would you like some mint cake? Bye. According to the brochure, obviously it's in here, maybe it was the sunset over Roscollin or the spirit of St. Dwynwen. But when Dave set eyes on Lynn, something clicked and they're still together. Now, that is very romantic and heartwarming, and, of course, I wish Lynn and Dave, the teacher from Altrincham, all the best. Although, to be fair, if you meet someone else whose idea of a holiday is a speed dating stroll across Anglesey, you are bound to get together because there will be only two of you. And the high street is very much a community high street, I think, full of people chatting and kids running about, and it's not blighted in any way with open shops, which I think it's... which I think always gets in the way of a decent high street. That's why there were no riots here. What would they have taken? Looters gone, oh, it was brilliant. We smashed the windows of all the shops and we made off with a "We Are Closed" sign. And a big pile of unopened letters from the bailiffs. But there was one shop which I was surprised to see, I have to say, Silky Soles, a fish pedicure emporium, because you've got the priorities sorted out here, Holyhead. Obviously, for luxuries like potatoes and toilet rolls, you need to go to Llandudno, but you've got essentials like getting your toes nibbled by a haddock, and that's... And we do have with us here Barbie, and so you are the proprietor of the Silky Soles.
Not the proprietor, but I do run it, yeah.
I know, is it business booming?
It is. Well, the thing is, after a hard day in the coal mine, you do need to have, you know...
And the tourists come in there?
Yeah, it's surprising, actually, yeah. And a lot of people, they didn't actually know about it. People from Norway have gone, oh, I didn't know this sort of thing existed. And I was like, yes.
So you're teaching Norway about what to do with fish?
Yeah.
They'll all be going up there. We've been wasting our time pickling herrings.
Exactly.
All right, brilliant. Thanks very much to Barbie and Silky Soles. Also, in the spirit of contributing to the community, I did try to get into Holyhead's favourite night spot. Now, if any tourists do feel that after a hard day's ship observing and speed dating strolling, they want to party hard through the night, then the obvious place to go to is the Piranha. And to get an idea of how loved this establishment is in Holyhead, I've not met a single person who calls it the Piranha. Everybody calls it the Pit. Now, this might be unfair, actually, because the pit obviously shows that it cares about education. At one point it advertised, I quote, "Bring in your A-level results and get a free drink." Because they want you to get on. But none of that would be as impressive as the fact that, to keep with the piranha theme, they brought in a tank of piranhas. At one point, the RSPCA were investigating whether having a tank of piranhas in a nightclub is cruel to the piranhas. And I think the club should actually tell them that it's an offshoot of Silky Souls. And get Barbie to market it as extreme fish pedicure. Even piranhas in a nightclub isn't as weird as this story. I've got a book called The Marion Conspiracy by a man called Graham Phillips that claims the Virgin Mary came to live in Anglesey. The evidence that he gives is the Anglesey Druids were the first to convert to Christianity, so the obvious conclusion is that she popped over here to find someone to be with on a speed dating stroll. Hi, I'm from Israel. How about you? My parents were poor too. I did have a son. My husband wasn't the father. Oh, no, it's not that. It's complicated. Lovely sunset. Would you like a biscuit? I'll let you know. This area is also popular with people who are fans of the Druids, because the Druids ruled Anglesey until 61 AD, because even when the Romans invaded Britain, they left Anglesey alone for about 20 years until eventually attacking them. So the Druids sort of held out more than anyone else. And now sort of Druidism is seen as this sort of new age hippie thing, you know, but according to Holyhead, the story of a port, the Romans faced, I quote, "terrifying Druids, women with flaming torches and armed warriors with hands raised to the heavens, calling down curses upon the invaders." And according to the Roman writer Tacitus, the invading army declared, "We should never have attacked when it's closing time at the pit." Now, someone more modern who should be mentioned, I believe, in any account of the town is your mayor, who I met last night in the 79 bar, Jeff Evans. Now, the job of mayor is usually to open school fetes and sort of make speeches where everybody thinks, oh, please, please stop. But Jeff's role has been slightly more notable. Do you want to tell everyone about when you went to Parliament?
Well, yeah, I'm like you. You're a protester, and I'm a great believer that sometimes you have to protest in order to achieve the aim. And I did. I went up to Big Ben and decided I was going to chain myself to Big Ben and create a protest to get more police in this area. In order to create the maximum problems, I tied the chains around my neck, around my body, around the man's bits. Now, when they tried to take the chains off me, I had to explain very forcefully that bits of it was attached to me. But one of them, I think, wanted to give me pain, and he pulled the chains, and I started to talk like a woman. I was arrested, I was set free, I met with the Home Secretary at the time, and as a result of that, they put in an extra 20 police officers in this area to deal with issues we had.
Also, Jeff, so people like to sort of try and do crazy things for charity, but I think, well, you've won all the prizes, I think.
The craziest one I did for comic relief was I had permission off Stena to go on their boat to Ireland. I then took all my clothes off, and I was left with a particularly skimpy thong. Now, I'm not the most healthy-looking guy or the best body, but I had a pair of tweezers, and the people were invited to withdraw hairs off my body with the tweezers. I actually got £2,000, but the women travellers took particular pleasure in paying double, and it was £1 a time, for withdrawing hairs from my bottom.
Well, a rare applause for a brilliant company. And also, I think we should send a message to Boris Johnson that is a proper eccentric mayor. don't think you're eccentric because you ride round on a bike and ruffle up your hair and go, oh, good Christ. Have your arse hairs pulled out for £1 a go, Boris. So, Druids. We've had Druids here, Romans. Holyhead has been turned into a port by Elizabeth I. Now royalty has moved here again. Prince William, Kate Middleton have a cottage just outside Holyhead. And it turns out they rent it for £750 a month. And I've got to say, what's the matter with you? You could have stung them for 10 times that. They're loaded. And everyone I've met, everyone says the royal couple is often seen in Tesco. And if you go, really? People say to you, well, they only live round the corner. And I mean, I live in London. I've never nipped into Halfords and seen the Queen. Just get in the WD-40. There is due reverence given all across Holyhead to the royal presence. On the internet, for example, on the Holyhead forum, when it was announced that they were moving here, one of the first responses was, I wonder how he'll enjoy a moonlight kebab. Another one was, maybe he'll give his old clothes to charity shops and then we'll see the town's tramps dressed in Savile Row tweeds. And I think a sense of the deep, deep respect for royalty from the town was summed up in this message. I, for one, look forward to enjoying a pint or two with Prince William in the Cambria. Doubtless he'll be delighted with the tales we can regale him with and learn lots of new words and phrases. Although most of them he would be wise not to repeat to his nan. And whilst he's busy hearing our tales of mirth, I'll take it upon myself to take his girlfriend Kate on a whirlwind tour of the town's pubs, get her drunk and cop a feel in the pit for the last dance. I think just to conclude then, Holyhead, I honestly mean it. This is a brilliant place. For example, there's a house in Treartha Bay that was used as the main house for the film of Wuthering Heights, which is fitting, as Emily Bronte did at first apparently want to set the novel in Holyhead. And so I will leave you, good people of Holyhead, with one piece she wrote in her earliest draft that I think does capture the essence of the town. Heathcliff spotted Catherine and the pair ran towards each other at enormous speed, almost skidding off the bends and over the cliffs into the merciless beast of the sea. That was awesome, said Heathcliff as they embraced. At that point, a bell rang. Time's up, said Catherine. I'll let you know. And she moved along to Dave, a teacher from Altrincham. Thanks very much.
Mark Steele's In Town was written and performed by Mark Steele, with additional material by Pete Sinclair. The producer was Sam Bryant.
The thing I like about Douglas is it's on the Isle of Man. Good nights out to be had.
Lots of pubs.
If Douglas was an animal, it would be one of those lizards you see on the TV that can be quite animated and energetic, but sleep quite a lot of the time.
Mark Steele's In Town.
Thanks very much. Welcome to Mark Steele's In Town, which this week comes from the Gaiety Theatre, an extraordinary building in Douglas, capital of the Isle of Man. And it is wonderful to be in a place with such a positive attitude, even during a global recession, with the sense to invest in one of the few industries still booming, fiddling tax. And that was the end of this week's Mark Steele's In Town. I might be being unfair, of course. It may well be that the companies who come here aren't just thinking about the low rates of tax. They're thinking, we'll base our computer company in the Isle of Man because it will be handy if we need a four-horned ram for any reason. Oh, really? I hadn't really looked at the tax rates. Now, something that you do grasp here very quickly, I think, as a visitor, is how helpful everybody is, especially with making sure that everybody who comes here knows the ferry times. It's a very kind part of your nature, because you've only got to say, could you put the heating on? It's a bit chilly here. And you're told, if you don't like it, there's a bolt in the morning. And then you realise this is, in fact, the slogan for the island. If someone complains about anything, in fact, your tourist brochure must be the shortest tourist brochure in the world. It just goes, come and visit the Isle of Man. If you don't like it, there's a bolt in the morning. So we're in the middle of the Irish Sea, because not everybody knows this. We're in the middle of the Irish Sea. We're less than 40 miles from England, Scotland, Ireland or Wales. And it is a bit strange here as a visitor. For example, you get off the ferry and the first thing you see in Douglas is these huge letters on a hill, like the ones in Hollywood, except they say electric railway. Like the place thinks no one will believe that our railway is actually electric. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Douglas, but electric railways aren't that much of a tourist attraction, really. Not since the 1950s. I bet page 2 of the tourist brochure goes, come to Douglas and marvel at our inside toilets. And our amazing cinema with moving pictures. But that wasn't the strangest part of my first morning here. I went for a walk, and at the top of a cliff there's this wonderful, beautiful bay called Happy Valley. And there was a man in a sort of council-looking uniform with a walkie-talkie. So I asked what he was doing, and he said, see my colleagues down there on the beach? Well, they're burying a dead cow that fell off a cliff. Now, this might be because of a bit of a cultural divide, but I should tell you, that doesn't happen all that often in London. Now, you do have your own general elections. In fact, you had one not long ago, didn't you? Nothing to do at all with UK politicians, which I think is brilliant, because it means you don't have any scandals about politicians fiddling expenses. There's no scandals about politicians fiddling expenses, because the whole island's on the fiddle, so that's much more democratic. The system seems to be that you vote mostly for sort of random people who aren't necessarily in any party, and they choose a chief minister who at the moment is Alan Bell. And this system seems to create a much healthier respect for your leaders than we have in the UK. For example, I had a look on the Isle of Man forum, the bit that deals with politics, and someone wrote the following. Manx Radio played a suitably depressive dirge following the election of Bell. I wonder what it was. And someone replied, that was Alan Bell's acceptance speech. The attitude of some people here does remind me of Britain. There's this thoughtful insight as well from the Isle of Man forum. I will never shut up while my fellow islanders are continually shafted by this jumped-up chicken dung government headed by the Council of Ministers aided by Freemasonry. And I read this and thought, well, he's a bit cross. Must have uncovered evidence of something that could destroy the Manx establishment. What could this corruption be? And he went on to explain. I was booked on this morning's 7 a.m. sailing to Liverpool. And the brand new Costa Coffee was shut, despite a notice on the door that said open at 6:30 a.m. Now, I have to tell you, I'm not generally a fan of politicians, but can you really call them chicken dung on the grounds that Costa Coffee wasn't open at 6:30? You're clearly more demanding than I am. You're the Minister of Education, pour me a coffee! Now, also, you've had quite a few celebrities from the UK come to live here in the Isle of Man lately, and it's always gone well, as far as I can see. Andy Kershaw, that was a big success. Just blended in absolutely perfectly, just politely playing global music in between arrests, and you hardly noticed him. And then Jeremy Clarkson popped over. And that's gone wonderfully well, with no controversy at all. Jeremy bought a lighthouse with a cottage but complained that some people were walking around the edge and taking photos. So he closed the walkway off with a fence, and now the courts have said that he's got to open it up again. What probably annoyed him was not so much that people were taking photos, more that they were walking, I should think. If they'd driven over his lawn in an Alfa Romeo, he'd have gone, and that's better! Don't come past my lighthouse with your hippie walking! Also, if you don't want people on an island to notice you, is it the best move to buy a lighthouse? This is what I think is brilliant here, and you notice it as soon as you arrive. There is such a strong sense of Manx identity. Your symbol of the three joined legs, it's everywhere. It's on every dust cart, it's on street signs, most buildings, bandstands in Noble Park. It's on every lamp post in some bits. Why does it have to be on every lamp post? Are you worried if it was only on every third lamp post, you might be walking along and think, oh, I've forgotten where I am. Am I in Germany? Let's look at the lamp post for a clue. Nothing! The TT motorbike race must be the most exciting thing that happens here all year, I would think. I mean, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I should explain this, because everybody will know this. There isn't a separate racetrack, like Brands Hatch or something. The normal roads are the race course. I must say, if you live here, isn't that a bit inconvenient? Must be like if once a year you said, right, now we can't use the kitchen for the next week, because this is the week when it gets turned into an arena for international bear fighting. Another sign here of national pride is that loads of people have told me ours is the oldest continuous parliament in the world. And the first time that I heard this, I made the mistake of saying, oh, really? I thought that was in Iceland. And I might as well have said, I spit on your three legs, sir! It was the equivalent of riding into Mecca on the back of a pig. They went, Iceland hasn't been continuous, though, has it? Apparently, the Parliament here was set up in the 10th century by the Norse, who called it the Thing. I'd have to say they were decent warriors, the Norse, but with creative writing, they let themselves down. So it was almost independent, the Isle of Man, even then. But eventually, in the 1700s, you know what you got up to? Smuggling. Anything that was supposed to go to England that had customs duty on it was diverted over here and smuggled. As if it's in the blood. What I think sums up the history here is the law that the British brought in to try and stop the smuggling, because they called it the Mischief Act. That's so English, isn't it? They must have gone, do you know what they're getting up to in the Isle of Man? I probably shouldn't say this in polite company. It's mischief, that's what it is. The 19th century, it changed a bit. You had to find a different line of business to keep going, and so the island became one of the world's first, I think, mass tourist resorts, which is why this book on the history of tourism to the Isle of Man was able to include this sentence, I quote, "The First World War brought disaster because the Isle of Man was starved of visitors." I've always said that the most disastrous thing about the First World War was the impact on the Isle of Man bed and breakfast industry. All you ever hear normally is Somme this and Gallipoli that. What about poor Mrs. Boothroyd on the promenade? She bought 6 dozen eggs in, couldn't use them, no one there. Luckily, as we know, the Americans got involved when President Wilson said he could not stand by while Douglas's guest houses stayed empty. And eventually the trade recovered. It must have just seemed wild here. This was still a time when most people couldn't imagine a holiday. You were the Ibiza of the 30s. There's probably people here going, all right, yeah, this is the Gaiety Theatre with a big shout-out for Ernest, Maud, Stanley, Amy, the Spinning Jenny, massive. This is the banging George Formby. We got 3 floors of pumping banjolele coming out here. The acts are going to keep going to 9:30 p.m. Now, the island did play a much bigger part in the Second World War. The Isle of Man Examiner said at the start of the war, the Führer knows exactly where he stands. He should remember the Manx in particular will stand for no nonsense. Do you know what? I think that's what swung it. It is true, of course, hundreds of people from the Isle of Man joined the forces, but the island was also affected because this is where the British government put its internment camps, where all Germans and Italians were imprisoned, including German Jews who'd fled from Nazi Germany because they were German. Now, what genius came up with that plan? You must have thought these prisoners were going, on the one hand, I'm Jewish, so that makes me sort of slightly wary of Hitler. But then again, I'm German, so I can't help but love him. After the war, the tourist scene kept going until the 1960s when package holidays took over, and then the island needed a new industry. So in 1960, the government here abolished surtax. This is the sort of advert that went into international newspapers to attract the wealthy to come and live here. The Isle of Man is a tax haven in the British Isles. As such, it offers low income tax, imposes no surtax, no estate duties, and no capital gains tax. Not a word of what it's like here. Look, come and live here. There's a lovely seaside, and we've even got an electric railway, if you can believe it. So all sorts of people came here. According to No Man is an Island, the period from 1970 to 1982 has been described as the Wild West without a sheriff. One notorious character, Chris Kingston, pioneered the practice of using groups of 3 companies, each owning the capital of the next, so there was no owner of any of them. He also kept llamas and interviewed people for their jobs wearing stockings, suspenders and a traffic cone. Never mind the Wild West, it sounds like you've been invaded by the Bullingdon Club. I do think the outcome of all of this, it has created quite an exotic atmosphere in a way, like where Douglas is part driven by the modern demands of banking and finance, but part of it is still like an old seaside town. When I went along around St George's Street area, and Liz, who's a journalist here, told me, oh, this is the banking district. And I thought, oh, it was brilliant, because it's only tiny. It's some of the sweetest banking district. It should be called the Square Inch, I think. But at the bottom of that area, just about 50 yards away, is the pub that has a rusty sign that says, pipe tobacco sold here. It's brilliant. There was a bloke there with these huge sideburns who was just stood on the step outside smoking a pipe. So you wander around here and you're not sure whether you're in 2030 or 1950. It's the most brilliant mix. There's probably folk singers who go, this is a little song about a tragedy from the past. 'Twas in the year of 2008, 5 brave stockbrokers came into town. And then in a flash, their subprimes crashed and their bonuses all went down. There you go. So on the one hand, these financial consultants dealing with billions advise their clients to base their capital here, but at the same time, this is the sort of thing that goes on. Now, this is an account from Colin Bishop, who's a bus driver. The last bus from Port Sodrick to Douglas was 11 o'clock at night. On my first night, I waited, but nobody came. So I came back and put my bus in the garage. Then I heard the phone ring and the inspector answered and shouted, who's just come back from Port Sodrick? I said, I have. He said, you've left 20 people there. I said, there was no one at the bus stop. He said, you're supposed to go in the pub and get them. It's the same with the social ideas here, because your image, it's not necessarily of being all that liberal. Now, I can't help wondering who drew up the laws in the past. You know, some of them, it just seems to me that there was a phone-in show, and then one day, whatever the caller said, that was the law. Here, all this tax I'm paying, I'm working for nothing. They want a scrap tax. Yeah, right then. Now we're going to Brian from Peel. These youngsters, they've no respect. They need birching. Yeah, right. I know it isn't fair, I know that. I know that you only birched people now and then. And the last time anyone was sentenced to be birched was 1981. It's going to be a hard image to shake off. It will eventually. It's like the woman who put a cat in the wheelie bin, isn't it? You know, she's probably done loads of other things, made lovely apple crumbles, played very good at bridge, just cat, cat, cat. And all this seems to be part of the way it is here. Part ahead of everybody else and part magnificently a century behind. I think that's something to be proud of. You know, we're here at the centre of the world's finance, and yet there's a bridge between the airport and the town where everyone has to say hello to Ferries. And you take this seriously. The taxi driver who brought me was really persistent when I said, oh, do I have to? Yes! I thought, blimey, I bet when Richard Dawkins comes here, he ends up going, all right, hello, Ferries. And then the taxi drivers all tell you these stories. They do seem to do that. Oh, I picked up these financial advisors once, and they wouldn't say hello to the Ferries. Next day, I read in the paper they'd gone to their meeting. All eaten by a stray leopard. Someone told me, actually, that if you get the bus that goes along there, that as it goes over, there's this mass mumbling of all the people. Hello, Ferry. The marvellous thing about this ferry bridge thing is that is rational compared to the story of Jeff, the talking mongoose. Now, at this point, I would like to introduce Dave Fisher, who is an expert on Manx fairies and related goblins. And, Dave, what's the crack with Jeff?
Well, Jeff was said to be a mongoose. He was in a place called Dawlish Cashen in the west of the island, in Derby. I think there was a lot of interest in the paranormal in the 1930s. It was perfect poltergeist activity. Somebody had a needle thrown across the room and stones thrown at the window. A needle thrown across the room? Because that's typical mongoose behaviour. But what isn't much known about is that Jeff used to hitchhike. Jeff apparently was known for hitchhiking on buses. And there's a bus conductor who was convinced and swore that Jeff ate his sandwiches.
This was a huge story right across Britain, wasn't it? Not just here.
Oh, right across the world. People came from America. I know the News of the World was here, and they were a former newspaper.
God, we keep trying to get hold of the mongoose, but we can only get his voicemail. Thanks very much, Dave. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. There's a Manx film industry now, of course. Johnny Depp made a film here. I wonder, was it Pirates of the Caribbean 4? With Keira Knightley going, Captain Jack, the entire British fleet are chasing us and the crew have turned into zombies. And him going, if you don't like it, dear, there'll be a ghost ship in the morning. And you should have your own song in the Eurovision Song Contest. You've got enough songs for it. I bought a record of some of them. There was one called The Wreck of the Herring Fleet, which I think is like Lady Gaga, but with fish. And there's a famous Manx song called Ciri Fod Nachti, which is an old ballad often sung here in Manx, and the translation goes, the snow's on the mountain, the snow's in the gill, my sheep they have wandered all over the hill. Uprise then, my shepherds, with haste let us go, where my sheep are all buried deep under the snow. Then there's some more verses, all of which end, my sheep are all buried deep under the snow. And then the last verse goes, then up rose those shepherds, with haste they did go, where the sheep lay all buried deep under the snow. They sought them with sorrow, they sought them with dread, and they found them at last, but the sheep were all dead. Some stories just have a twist that you can't see coming. Of course they were all bloody dead. They were buried deep under the snow. I want to know if there's another Manx song that goes, I must find my cow. I can't wait to see if it's doing all right since it fell off the cliff. Now, there is a revival in Manx national culture at the moment, especially the language. Now, I'd sort of learnt this. I'm going to try and do it without looking. Tan radian ein lectra, which means our railway's electric, you know. Now, I want to speak to Brian Stoll, who I think's here, and Brian, I think it's fair to say that you played a part in reviving the Manx language.
Yeah, but just a small part. I was a kid at school when I got interested in Manx, and I went round with particularly Doug Farragher and others who were recording Manx.
Well, one of the thoughts I think was brilliant here when you talk about it is that when people first went to try and pick up the Manx phrases to revive it, that some of the language was sort of much coarser than it would be in English, wasn't it?
Well, it reflects the Isle of Man was a very rural society. And particularly posh Victorians would have been scandalised by some of the things that were said in Manx. When commercial cookers were made available, before that everyone had to cook on fires, obviously. One old fella said about the cooker when he saw it, he was amazed by it, he said, Yenach be my je kek kavel. It would make good food off horse shit. And this was a sort of great accolade for the cooker. And one of my favourites was the story about what women would say to men coming into the house would be things like Trids Jack as chow the Vagalen, which I hope some people here can understand. Come in and warm your balls.
Thanks very much, Brian, and thanks very much. Good. Best of luck for... It does seem to be this marvellous effort to pursue this policy of being old and modern at the same time, because while one chunk of the island is trying to revive this Celtic language, another part of it has decided the next industry you're going to dominate is space travel. And space companies are basing themselves here, and according to NASA, the countries who are most likely to stage the next moon landing are, in order, America, Russia, China, India, the Isle of Man. So you've got a space centre. You've bought 2 space stations. People listening aren't going to believe this, are they? And the plan is to set up a space tourist industry. So you'll be telling people, we don't have any direct flights as yet as far as Paris. But we can get you to Venus. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are different theories as to your motives here. For example, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of David Icke, but he has studied the matter, and this is what he's written. It is my belief, through lengthy research, that the Isle of Man is the remnant of Atlantis. At the time Atlantis was destroyed, the people of Atlantis were mining for helium on Saturn. After time, the ability to travel to Saturn was lost, and helium was not found on Earth, so their spacecraft were buried deep in the sands of Egypt as pyramids. And finally, he knits the whole story together. Therefore, the Saturn aliens have claimed the Isle of Man as a holy place. And that is why the Queen is the Lord of Man and wears a Saturn hat. Every time I read that, I find myself going, oh, my old Queen's from Saturn. She wears a Saturn hat. And when she's mining helium, her voice goes up like that. And it's fitting, I think, now that you have a space industry, as the thriving film industry here is planning, I was told, a new Star Trek film. set in the Isle of Man. And I was allowed to have a look at the script, and so I'll finish tonight, Douglas, by reading the opening lines to the new Star Trek film set in the Isle of Man, which is a fitting testimony to Douglas. Captain's log, stardate 5th of May 3013. We have landed on a most peculiar and unfathomable planet. One of their residents approached Mr. Spock and said, "Wow, you've got the 3-litre Starship Coupe Turbo GL. Reaches Mach 3 in less than 8 seconds and takes black holes like a dream." Then they informed us we could stay unharmed and spaceship duty was only 2% of the agreed galactic rates, as agreed by the longest continuous parliament in the galaxy, except for a 50-year period in the 21st century when their leaders gave up running the planet to pour coffee. If I was to summarise this planet in one word, I think I would choose mischief. And after all, if you don't like it, you can be beamed up in the morning. Thanks very much.
The Mark Steele's in town, Scroot as Jint, Irish Mark Steele, Les Tullia Stu, Irish Pete Sinclair, as Venjanta, Sam Bryant.
Matlock or Matlock Bath? Definitely Matlock.
Matlock Bath, every time.
It's just different.
Matlock is better because it doesn't pretend to have a seaside.
You also have all that really fun seaside stuff in the middle of the country.
It's a bit Blackpool, isn't it? It's lovely.
Hey up me duck.
Everyone calls each other duck, so it's weird, you know.
Hey up me duck.
Worst thing about Matlock Bath is the preponderance of chip shops, unfortunately. Very little else. Chip shops and...
The seagulls. The worst thing is the seagulls.
It's a bit behind the times, isn't it?
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you very, very much. Welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which this week comes from the beautiful Derbyshire town of Matlock Bath, a town so secure about its identity it proudly sells itself to tourists as a seaside resort, even though it's 120 miles from the sea. When you first get here, you just can't help noticing that the entire high street is made up of amusement arcades, fish and chip shops, and is designed to look like a seafront. And it works because the only seaside thing you don't have is a sea. And I've always thought the presence of a sea is overrated in deciding whether somewhere's by the sea. Lots of people here make the boast that Matlock Bath has the longest inland promenade in Britain, which is true, because a promenade is something you have at the sea. And nowhere else inland is mental enough to believe they're at the sea. If you wanted, you could also have the tallest inland lighthouse, the busiest inland coast guard, and the widest ferry port at a place where there's no water. Because this is the only town with a personality disorder called delusional inland seaside by proxy syndrome. When you see someone come in from Chesterfield, you all go, "All hands on deck, there be pirates." And make them walk the plank and land on some grass. I bet psychotherapists here have to sit you all down every now and again and say, "Can you describe to me, Matlock, what happens to you in the moments before you hear the waves crashing onto the front by the lead mining museum?" So this isn't so much of a show, it's an intervention. And maybe the first thing you should do as part of your recovery is start thinking of your promenade as more of a road. To be fair, you've got more than a sea that's a bit on the dry side here. You've also got the famous cable cars, of course, that go up to the heights of Abraham. And when you see the terrain that leads up to the top there, you can't help but look at those cable cars and think, you lazy bastard. It's not that much of a hill. The cable cars were installed in 1984 to boost the tourism trade, as word was getting around that there isn't really a sea. Now, luckily, the town planners were aware that the important thing with a tourist attraction is to make it easily accessible, which is why to get to the cable car, all you have to do is walk to the edge of the railway platform, across a track, go behind a fence, go up a muddy bank, through some puddles, round another fence, walk through a forest, and there you are. You can wait for the cable car that takes you back across the place where you started. Have you all been up it? Yeah, no, it's fun, isn't it? I love it, especially the bit where it stops for a few minutes and leaves you dangling over the A6. I'm particularly fond of the quote of the first people from Matlock Bath to go up in the cable car who said, and I quote, "You can see for miles up here, across to Snitterton and west out towards Buxton, across the full breadth of the Derwent Valley." Hang on, there's no sea. They've been lying to us. Now, it is possible that the cable car was put here after someone read a book called Nooks and Corners of Derbyshire, which I think I've got somewhere, that says, one of the greatest attractions of Matlock Bath is the wooded slopes called the Heights of Abraham and the gigantic mountain towering above it. Gigantic mountain. Oh, it's terrible in Matlock in the summer. You can't move for Sherpas. We set off on day one from the base camp at the station car park. We took a final glance back at the comforts that we were leaving behind, going into battle with a gigantic mountain, knowing that we wouldn't reach the summit for 15 minutes. The Heights of Abraham had a huge impact on so many people, including the poet Lord Byron came to Matlock. And it was Byron who called the town Little Switzerland. And he wrote a poem as well, explaining this description. "To Matlock, sir, a place so grand you never more shall frown. I call it Little Switzerland. Go there to get put down." Now, marvellously, not only is there a cable car, but there was a tramway built in the 1890s that just went up the Bank Road, I think it was called at the time, and back, because you don't like walking up a hill, do you? So it was twopence to go up, a penny to come back down. According to the pamphlet called Twopence Up, Penny Down, the tram was slow. You could get off, buy a packet of cigarettes, catch it up and get back on again. And it was modelled, apparently, on the tram system in San Francisco. You're not lacking in self-esteem, Matlock. But here's something that is true. There's a mineral that you get here in Matlock that is yours. So much so that it's been named after you, a mineral called Matlockite. And some geologists claim that it has a similar effect as kryptonite does with Superman and takes away your powers, in your case, the ability to walk up a hill. So many other attractions here. On Twitter, there's a man called James Nichols who wrote, "The man in the general store at Matlock Bath gets arsey if you ask for change for the station car park." Even if you buy a Snickers Duo off him. Do you know that bloke? There are brilliant shops here, though, of course, especially in Matlock Bath, little seaside-y shops. There's a 1940s cafe called Pudding on the Ritz, which is lovely, and it says on the board outside, "Step back into the 1940s, authentic 1940s cafe, free Wi-Fi." I was hoping to make a cake with some of me powdered egg, and no mistake, but I couldn't get the recipe because the blooming broadband was down. One of the delights of Matlock Bath is, of course, the wonderfully varied cuisine on offer. Now, usually, when you go to a town, you face the disappointment, I think, of finding a fish and chip shop and seeing that the shop next door to the fish and chip shop sells other things, such as clothes or vegetables. But here, if you accidentally walk 5 paces past the fish and chip shop and still fancy fish and chips, instead of having to walk back, there will be another fish and chip shop. And the names of the fish and chip shops are marvellous as well in Matlock. There's Promenade Fish Bar, Taste of the Waves. Taste of those Matlock waves. I expect when the wind's right, you all get up at 5 in the morning for an early bit of surfing, do you, on the River Derwent? I bet it's like California in 1970 at the back of the disused basketball court. But it gets packed here on a bank holiday. You know, it's just rammed. I honestly can't work out where everyone's going. Thousands of people. Are they all going to the amusement arcades? I'm afraid we're fully booked at the moment, sir. There should be a space available on the push-a-coin-off-the-ledge machine in about 20 minutes, if you care to wait, sir. And apparently, of course, the man who owns the amusement arcades there is a millionaire. The only trouble is, all his money's in 2p's. I'll buy a speedboat. How much is it? £80,000, sir. Right, here you are. Ching, 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 ching. There's £1. The next issue is to emphasise how important it is not to mix up your matlocks. So we're in Matlock Bath at the moment, not Matlock, which is an entirely different place. That's a whole 9 metres away. Or to use the local language, 30 nautical feet. So which Matlock is everybody from? We need to find this out. How many people from Matlock? Yeah. Some from Matlock Bath? Yeah. And Matlock Dale? Matlock Green. Oh, I'd missed that one. It's flat. I bet you look at it with envy, don't you? No, I can see why you have to call all the different bits of Matlock different names, because otherwise it's just a huge, overwhelming metropolis. You wouldn't know where you were unless you were able to break it down into its separate individual Matlocks. But you've only got to walk past a tree here and you suddenly find yourself in a different village if you're not familiar. And you get told things. You find yourself in a pub or something, someone going, take my advice and don't go past second tree after the footpath because that's Snitterton. They've got a river and a hall and you can't trust that. And don't go to Lower Lumsdale, their sheep are poisonous from the waterfall. Now, 8 inches in that direction is Farley. And then you've got Wirksworth, they're bonkers even by Matlock standards. Cromford's a rat race, and there's over 9 people live there. I don't trust it. That side of the road is Matlock Bank. Whatever you do, don't get it mixed up with Matlock Bath. And past that ditch is Bonsall. Nothing ever happens there except spaceships hovering over it full of aliens. To be fair, Bonsall was the subject of quite a discussion on TripAdvisor about whether it was a good place to stay if you were planning walks around the Peak District. And one reply from Bonsall was, whether Bonsall would be a good place to stay for walks depends, I think, on whereabouts in the Peak District you want to walk. That's the way to sell yourself. Hello, we're thinking of stopping in your village of Bonsall. Is it a good spot for walking? It's all right if you want to walk round Bonsall. If you want to walk round Snitterton, you're better off staying in Snitterton, you know. Now, who's from Wirksworth, then? There's a few from Wirksworth. I asked because a man called Anthony... Is Anthony here? Yeah. Oh, hello, Anthony. Because a man called Anthony requested that we do the whole show from Wirksworth, right? And we had this brilliant little exchange. And it did endear me to the place, because to start with, he wrote, we've got Janet Rager lingerie and tape for lawyers' briefs made at Harlem Mill, Ecclesbourne Railway, Adam Bede car sales. And I mean, it's a wonder there haven't been several shows written about Adam Bede car sales of Wirksworth. It went on Carsingham Reservoir, Beauty Spot, Book Festival, a beer festival, Northern Lights Cinema, which is tiny, and an international marmalade festival. So I wrote to say, thanks very much, but we're already doing Matlock. And Anthony replied, you're lost then, as I just won a medal at the International Marmalade Festival. Surprisingly, Anthony didn't mention the National Stone Centre, which I suppose maybe comes just outside your domain, is it? Yeah. The National Stone Centre. Now, I'm not proud of this, but I was honestly really excited about going to the National Stone Centre. Because I thought, where else can you see an array of stones? I thought there'd be like, what's going to be there? There'll be a hexagonal stone and stones that have won the World Skimming Championships. Maybe a replica of the stone that David used to slay Goliath. And you pass all these country houses on the way made entirely of stone. And then you get to the National Stone Centre and it's a prefab building made entirely of plastic. The only construction for miles and miles that isn't made of stone, and inside there are some pictures of stones and a cafe and not a single stone! Not one in the National Stone Centre. And I said to the woman who works there, I don't mean to be rude, but there are no stones here. And she said, yes, everybody who comes here makes the same complaint. But Bonsall is even more adventurous as they organise the World Hen Racing Championships. And they organise days, and I promise this is true, where people bet on which part of a field a cow does a dump. And instead of being quietly ashamed of this, like people who can't stop stealing things, they boast about it as if it reflects well on them. And now we're very honoured here to have Lynn. Where's Lynn? So, Lynn, first of all, tell me about the hen racing.
The hen racing came about because the pub landlord who was new to the area was trying to find things to entertain people. And it was annoying one of the locals a bit, so the local span him a story about this historical event called hen racing that he could reinvent and relaunch. But it was all a wind-up.
Right, because hens aren't known for their ability to...
So he started the hen races, and it's now a global event. Television companies come from all over the world to film the hen races.
What, is it like Sky Sports 3 or something? I'm the very first time, and they're all going in different directions. But everyone goes up there and takes part in this then?
Yeah, it's a very popular thing. Actually, my friend Trevor's got a really good story about the hen racing.
Oh, right. Yeah, lovely. No,
I'm the only human being ever to have entered the hen races. Now, this was before...
You're not going to get disqualified in retrospect like these people.
Well, this was before the international rules were set, so, you know, it was fairly easy for me to enter at this point in time.
Yeah.
I dressed up as a chicken. The hardest part was finding the red tights, because the colour's essential in these kind of things, you know.
Yeah.
And I lined up with the hens. Hens aren't good at racing starts, so when you get in the crouching position,
right,
you've always got a head start.
Right. I'm just thinking of how rapidly the property prices are falling. This is by no means all of Bonsall, because it's also known as one of the best places in Britain to see flying saucers. Now, some people of a sceptical frame of mind might wonder why it is that aliens that can cross a universe would choose a village by Matlock to hover over, but one leading astronomer from Jodrell Bank suggested, from signals received through radio telescopes that analyse fluctuations in matter displacement in the areas around Matlock affected by unusually high cosmic activity, the aliens are saying, keep looking, there must be a sea there somewhere. Maybe the spacemen go on Aliens Net and ask, like, is Bonsall a good place for our spaceship to hover? It depends where in the Peak District you're thinking of invading. And there's a lot more to Matlock and Matlock Bath than its irrational seaside town image, we know that. It grew as a town originally through its thoroughly rational claim that its water had magical healing properties. The spa here was first discovered in the 1690s. The water in Matlock Bath cured you if you drank it, whereas the water in Matlock Bank only healed you if you bathed in it. And the other natural substance here that made Matlock valuable was, of course, lead. And this is handy because nothing ensures that local water is especially healthy as much as huge dollops of lead fall in it. And so there is a lead museum, which is right in this very building that we're in, and it's fascinating, the lead museum. Not a single bit of lead, of course, but there's a book I've got there called A History of the Matlocks, and it quotes a traveller from 1732 who says, there are no inhabitants in the town except those who dig for lead ore, although one morning I did see a woman naked. She laughed and said, oh, nobody takes notice of this sort of thing here. You're more foxy than you let on, Matlock. Although, to be fair, she probably was on the way to the nudist beach. In the 1860s, the first hydrotherapy centre was opened. And one method that the hydro centres used for cleansing the body was smearing it with chilies. The book, Tuppence Up, a Penny Down, says chili paste would be rubbed on various parts of the body and was excellent in helping patients to forget aches and pains. To be fair, the water that you drank from the Matlock Hydrotherapy Centre did have an impact on the visitors' health because many customers developed a huge disfiguring growth on their neck that became known as Derbyshire neck. And this is a thyroid condition that leads to these lumps, and it may even have been caused by some of the treatments at the centres. So how many other tourist towns can boast a whole disease named after them like that? It must have been like going away and getting a tan is now. You'd go into work with a hideously deformed neck and people would go, "Oh, someone's been on holiday." And you've also got caves here, of course, and they've been another attraction since Victorian times. In the 1950s, did you know that? I was amazed with it. In the 1950s, 500 people lived in the caves, calling themselves troglodytes, until there was a meeting in the town that agreed to ban them from all the local pubs. And in an unexpected turn of events, some of the cave dwellers were then converted by the local Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course they got converted. Caves don't have a door on it, do they? Just come straight in. There was the time in 1913 when animals were added as an attraction to Lovers Walk, but they escaped, including wolves. And the problem with the bears was no one realised how big they would become. It's such a charming innocence. You've got a delightful history with animals here. The Gem of England tells us in the 1930s the council held a rat week every year to encourage householders to exterminate their rats. Now, this is something else unique about Matlock, that they had to be encouraged to get rid of them. I suppose you all thought there's bound to be rats. They come in on the ships. The book goes on to say, I swear it says this did not look good for a health resort. And it's endearing, though, Matlock. It's like the Beast of Ribur. You're familiar with the Beast of Ribur? That's supposed to live round here because Smedley, who owned one of the first hydrotherapy centres, had a mansion built on top of the hill at Ribur called Smedley's Folly. And after he died, the mansion was turned into a zoo. And the zoo ran into problems when the cages all broke because no one had anticipated that any of the baby animals would get bigger. After John Smedley died, the zoo was shut down, and then there were reports of the beast. And according to Wikipedia, the Beast of Ribur is an alleged wild animal that may live round the hamlet of Ribur near Matlock. Some believe it to be a phantom wild cat, like the Beast of Bodmin, while others contest that it's a fox. It's brilliant. Imagination again. Has anyone seen the beast?
My chickens have suffered from it.
Your chickens, have they?
Yeah.
How many chickens did you have?
I did have 6.
All right. Are you sure that they were all done in by the beast, or was one of them rather tall and went off running in a race? There's every sort of creature here. You've got an aquarium, which advertises itself with the slogan, "Come and see our famous carp collection." But God, I think, isn't that a bit dangerous? That one of the only buildings in the town that isn't a fish and chip shop is an aquarium. You've only got to have one of the chippies go a bit short one day, because there's been a poor haul from the trawlermen round the Cape of Cromford. And there's a petrifying well. It's brilliant, the aquarium, isn't it? The well is full of thermal water and minerals that make anything in there look as if it's turned to stone. And next to the well, there's a notice that tells you how people would be fascinated to watch this happen. And it must have been so exciting to watch objects petrify in front of your very eyes over a period of 40 years. But the main attraction was always the environment, and you were rightly proud of it. So there were poems such as this one by a man called J. Montgomery that went, "Great nature, slumbering by fair Derwent's stream, conceived these giant mountains in a dream." And my favourite review of this poem was the one that went, "It's not a giant mountain!" If any of you ever go to the Andes, you'll go, "Bloody hell! These must have been bought as gentle inclines, but no one realised they'd get bigger." And you've got illuminations. The Venetian Boat Builders Association put lights over their boats and sailed down the river, all lit up, causing the local tourist website to declare, "Move over, Blackpool. This is how we do illuminations in Derbyshire." Yeah. What does Blackpool know about illuminations? That's not much of a day out going up there, is it? And when the tide's out up there, it could be a 10-minute walk to the sea, not like here. It is exciting. There's a brilliantly exciting place. You don't notice, you're not restricted by the normal rules here. You've even got a Gulliver's Kingdom. Now, this is a leisure park with rides. There's a roller coaster. There's a swinging pirate ship thing there and a log flume. And in most towns, it'd be a treat for kids. But in Matlock, I bet you all go, "Oh, it's a pirate ship. And we can go up it and you can see Australia." I love it there. I mean, one or two of the rides I was surprised with because I wasn't sure that these things actually are part of Gulliver's Travels. There's a JCB zone. Did that play a big part in the book? I also love the little signs on boards dotted around Matlock to tell you about the history, such as how this was the setting for the world's first factory. But my favourite is the one that says, "As the Earth was forming 330 million years ago, this area was the coast." This explains it. 330 million years ago, day trippers had sit on the promenade eating fresh fish caught that afternoon in Snitterton, listening to the waves gently lapping up the A6. But time is irrelevant here. You're not slaves to fashion. Your shops look like they should be in the 1970s. Your buildings are Victorian. Your origins as a town comes from the spars of the 1700s. And your identity as a seaside town comes from 330 million BC. The first factory was round here, created by Richard Arkwright, who invented his spinning machine. And that's a sign of your ambition, Matlock. Not only were you ahead of the times with the first factory, but already you were trying to start the Industrial Revolution to create global warming to make the tide levels rise. And then before you know it, wallop, and you're back by the sea again. It's a little beacon of childish innocence here. Ooh, let's get in the cable car and look round the caves and pretend we're on a mountain, we've got a sea, and you want to go, "Yes, Matlock, you have, bless." And I will leave you, Matlock, with the words of someone else who understood the playfulness of your town, because Jonathan Swift, whose famous book Gulliver's Travels has given its name to your leisure park, is said by some to have been inspired, in part at least, by the very town of Matlock. And I'll leave you with this. Thank you very much. Lemuel Gulliver woke amidst the debris of his shipwrecked vessel, pondering where on the globe he might have landed. "I've arrived at a stretch of land adjacent to the roughest of seas," he thought. "I'm probably in Matlock." Gingerly he removed a dripping sock and placed it on the ground, which was when he heard the voice of a Lilliputian cry, "Good God, it's gigantic. We would surely never be able to climb to the top of that without a cable car." As Gulliver lit a cigarette, the little people surrounded him, screaming, "Such light! It is surely far superior to any illuminations they have at Blackpool." Gulliver's observations took him to the world these little folk had created. He saw a vast and complex city lay before him, comprising fish and chip shop after fish and chip shop, heading off yonder and away, way, way unto the horizon, a full 9 metres away, in a place called Lilliput Bath. Thank you very much.
Mark Steele's In Town was written and performed by Mark Steele,
with additional material by Pete Sinclair.
It was produced in Matlock Bath by Carl Cooper.
It was a BBC Studios production.
Thank you very much.